What if I told you that most of the world's debt isn't meant to be repaid? That hidden somewhere between the ledgers of central banks, corporations, and nations, there exists a system where losses disappear, profits multiply, and accountability vanishes. You've heard of national debt, of trillions owed, of deficits that must be reduced. But behind the curtain of those numbers lies something stranger, a financial illusion so deeply embedded that even governments have become its unwitting actors. The global economy, as we know it, runs on promises. Digital numbers backed not by gold, not by labor, but by belief. Every time a government borrows, it issues bonds. Every time a bank buys those bonds, it creates new money out of thin air. But what happens to that debt when it's too big to pay back? It doesn't vanish. It transforms, shifted and recycled through what can only be described as the world's hidden ledger. To understand this invisible system, we have to rewind. In the early 20th century, nations were still tethered to gold. The idea was simple. Every paper note represented something real. But wars, reconstruction, and greed made gold delimiting. Governments needed more spending power than gold allowed. So, one by one, they broke the link. The United States officially abandoned gold in 1971. That decision didn't just change America. It rewired the entire planet's financial DNA. Now, without gold as a restraint, debt became the new money. Banks could create it. Governments could issue it. Investors could trade it. And central banks became the silent architects controlling its flow. When a government borrows money, it sells bonds to investors, often banks. These banks don't use cash they already have. They create it electronically, using those bonds as collateral. In return, the government gets funds to spend, and the bank earns interest. But here's the twist. The same bonds can then be resold, rehypothecated, or pledged again, creating multiple layers of credit from a single original debt. This is leverage, and it's the backbone of the modern financial illusion. By the 1980s, this system was thriving. Central banks learned that by adjusting interest rates, they could control how fast this hidden credit machine turned. When rates were low, debt exploded and so did corporate profits. When rates rose, debt payments crushed economies, allowing central banks to step in as saviors, buying up the very debt that had caused the crisis. Over time, every financial panic, from Latin America's debt collapse to the 2008 housing crash, became an opportunity. Each time, central banks absorbed toxic debt, shifted it off visible balance sheets, and replaced it with new liquidity. The result was always the same. Public debt rose, private profits soared, and the losses were quietly buried in the hidden ledger of central banking. Take Japan, for instance. Its central bank now owns more than half of its national debt. The government owes the central bank. The central bank prints money to pay itself, and the cycle continues. On paper, Japan's D2 GDP ratio looks catastrophic, over 250%. Yet, markets remain calm. Why? Because everyone knows the debt will never actually be paid back. It will just be rolled over, revalued, and quietly dissolved across time. The same pattern echoes across Europe and the United States. During the 2008 crisis, trillions in bad mortgage securities simply disappeared, absorbed by central banks, replaced with digital money, and hidden behind jargon like quantitative easing. But nothing really disappeared. It was just moved from private hands to public balance sheets. Every crisis strengthens this hidden network. In 2020, when the pandemic froze global trade, central banks didn't just rescue economies, they redefined ownership itself. By printing unprecedented amounts of new money, they effectively became the largest shareholders in their own nation's debt. Trillions were created overnight, yet inflation, years later, became the cost the public had to pay. The hidden ledger isn't an accounting trick anymore. It's a system of control. By holding the majority of sovereign debt, central banks indirectly control the lifeblood of nations, their interest rates, their currencies, even their policies. The same institutions that were designed to serve governments now quietly govern them. And what happens when debt becomes infinite? It stops being about repayment. It becomes about management, keeping the illusion stable, ensuring the public never questions how their economies can owe more than they produce. In this system, debt isn't a burden. It's a product, one that generates perpetual streams of interest flowing upward, from citizens and governments financial institutions that never lose. Every bailout, every stimulus, every rescue package is really a transfer, a reshuffling of the hidden ledger, where the names change but the outcome doesn't. Even digital currencies fit the same pattern. Central bank digital currencies, or CBDCs, are being promoted as innovation. But behind the technology lies the same purpose: total traceability, total control, and the ability to adjust financial reality at will. Imagine a world where your money expires, your spending is monitored, and your access depends on compliance. That's not a conspiracy theory. It's already being tested. And so, we arrive at the uncomfortable question. If every country is buried in debt, who profits? The answer isn't a single name or nation. It's the network itself. The cycle of lending, absorbing, and reissuing money that sustains power through perpetual debt. A system where crises are opportunities, and where the ledger behind nations always balances, just not in our favor. Debt is not a mistake of the system. It is the system. It's how value, power, and obedience are maintained. Central banks don't just react to crises. They shape them. Every intervention deepens their influence and erases accountability. The illusion of stability is more dangerous than chaos, because as long as people believe everything is under control, the hidden ledger remains safe, unseen, untouched, and unchallenged. The moment people stop questioning where their money comes from, or where their debt goes, the system wins. So, the next time you hear that a nation's debt has increased, or that a bailout is necessary, remember this. It's not about saving the economy. It's about maintaining the ledger. And if we ever want to reclaim what's real, what's earned, what's owned, it begins with understanding what was hidden all along. If this opened your eyes, share it, because awareness is the one currency they can't control.